Oh my word. When is the last time I've seen you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I haven't seen you in forever.
Yep, I'm doing all right. You know, no worse for wear.
Where are you?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Is that where you intend to be? Is that where you want to be?
We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. The journey doesn't seem to end.
Amen. Amen.
The journey doesn't seem to end.
Well, I haven't seen you in so long. I hadn't been able to catch up. I do follow you on LinkedIn, but I don't read very much of that, so I haven't really known what was going on. But it is absolutely exceptional to see you now. Yeah,
Oh, thank you very much. Good to see you. See you in a comfortable chair.
absolutely. I'm at home, working at home.
Uh,
They don't make us go in there anymore right now. So here I
I get
am.
you.
So the
I
way
get
this works, I'm going to ask you to tell us your name and to share anything about you feel comfortable sharing with us, so we can get to know you better and kind of lead the conversation.
Okay,
Once
no
the
problem.
conversation is over, it will be converted, and I will send you a link to it so you can watch it. And you can tell me whether I can update it or not.
Okay.
Great,
Yeah, I'm giving you that okay, unless it just bombs. You, we're good.
good, thank you. Your name, sir?
My name is Stager Clay Smith.
That's a valuable name. Tell us why.
It's a long story. It's a family name now, but essentially I got the name because when my father went to law school at Howard University from Omaha, Nebraska, he told my mom to name me after him. She forgot because she was in labor. She gave the honor to name me from my aunt. And so it's a German-based name that she got when she and her husband were stationed overseas. But at least, you know, she gave me my father's middle, and, you know, they couldn't mess up with the last name.
All right.
And Stager Clay Smith is how I got my name.
Can you tell us a little bit about your father?
Uh, well, I will tell you, if you can see, he's always over my shoulder. I don't know if you can see.
I see him. Yes, I do.
That's his portrait.
Yes.
Uh, he was a phenomenal lawyer. Uh, he was one of the first few African American lawyers who had a SJD issued from GW, went to Howard Law School, uh, was a heck of a civil rights lawyer, led the EEOC. Then he became the dean of the Howard Law School, and he wrote the Bible, as we call it, on the history of Black lawyers from inception to 1944. So you can't cite or talk about any historical Black lawyer without citing to his book.
Wow.
And unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago of Alzheimer's, and I miss him dearly.
Because I think while you were still at Duke, he was still alive, wasn't he? While you were
He
still,
was,
yeah, yeah. I didn't know
yeah,
he died. I'm so sorry that he has.
yeah.
So now you have a famous name, famous father. Where do we go from there? Tell us how we got from father son to where you are now. Can you walk us through that journey?
Yeah. So currently, I live in Houston, Texas. I just finished a advanced degree program at University of Houston Law Center, focusing on health law, trying to round out my insurance law practical and educational experience. So I'm figuring out what my next steps are since I just graduated in this Corona environment right now. Um,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And so, because I'm talking to you, you know, my travels went through Durham, North Carolina, to say it correctly, at Duke University, where I got another advanced degree in law and entrepreneurship. And so that's where you and I became friends and met. I'm from Washington, D.C., grew up and went to Howard University, went to law school in Ohio, from Ohio, I went to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. From Philadelphia, I went to where I worked for an insurance company. I worked for another insurance company. They sent me from Philadelphia to Miami. Then I went from Miami to Atlanta. Then I went to Durham, North Carolina, back to Atlanta, then here in Houston, Texas. And so that's kind of rounding out my world travels right now.
So I'm going to ask you the difficult question first, and we can talk more casually first. What is it like to be a Black man in America, and
Uh, you
a Black lawyer too?
know, it's an interesting question for me. And as a matter of fact, I just had this conversation with my son's godfather, who's a lawyer. Um, I grew up a little differently in terms of being a Black male and being a Black lawyer. Because my father went to Howard Law School and I grew up with a lawyer, um, I fortunately had a really good father who was an academic.
Mhm.
So he always instilled in us values of education, pride. We knew our history in terms of Black American history. And he also was a curious man in terms of various issues uh, involving life, politics, religion, science, things of that nature. And that kind of rubbed off on me. So I was able to do a lot of things because of him, meet a lot of people who were, icons in Black America, you know, because I went to bar association meetings with him and things of that nature. The neighborhood I lived in Washington, D.C. was probably what you would call the upper echelon of Washington, D.C. So I stayed within my community. So therefore, I was not so much exposed to a lot of overt racism because of that. And then I went to Howard University, which was yet another bubble because that was a Black community. I don't think that I started seeing how the country was in terms of being a Black man until I got to law school in Ohio when I went to the middle part of the country. And then going to Detroit. And again, I worked for a Black law firm. So again, I was within that bubble. I don't think, and then after that, when I worked in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, I worked for a cabinet secretary who was a law school mate of my dad. It wasn't until probably I started working for Fortune 500 companies, where as a Black male, Black lawyer, I started to see the systemic racism, although they respected me because I was educated.
Mhm.
Although sometimes, because I'm overeducated, I would get the backhanded slap, like, yeah, Sage is smart, but he's always in school, things of that nature. But the reason why I felt I had to go to school sometimes was because I wasn't being progressed, even though I was smart, even though I was practical, even though I was well spoken. I never could get past a certain point. So I always thought education could help me compensate for that. And to some extent it did, and to some extent it hasn't. And right now I'm trying to figure out whether or not that education will help me do something, which is what I'm very interested in. Interestingly enough, is healthcare, technology. That's what I'm really in, the law. And that's what I'm looking for. But I know that's a long-winded answer, but we'll see whether or not being a Black lawyer at this age, dealing with other issues, will help me get to where I want to be.
Remind me when we're talking offline, I want to introduce you to someone I did a talk with today. Her name is Michelle Okoh, I believe, Okoh. She is an environmental health justice lawyer, which I had never heard of that before. I mean, usually the two words don't go together, environmental health. But she's a phenomenal woman in her experiences. And she's also going back to school. She's going to get her MPH, Master's in Public Health, because she really wants to continue this, to look at the systemic racism and how it's tied to the environment and the health, which is very interesting. So remind me in case I forget, because I'm old, senile.
Well, environmental exposure for people of color is a social determinant of health, especially down here in Houston. You have the floods and what have you, and how that affects people of color substantially over the past few years. So environmental justice would be one of the things I would look at in terms of the use of AI, in terms of AI would be embedded in software, and that software would be regulated as software as a medical device. So the question then becomes, because AI is a great tool, but it is replete with bias,
And
you
race.
know,
Yep.
right.
Right.
And so how does a doctor who's using this software, or a hospital using this software, how can it be used to make sure that when doctors are determining recommendations and outcomes, that they're taking race into consideration, and then in some instances, and not take race into consideration, also dealing with how and where that person lives and all the other things that that person who's seeking care can be helped with that AI in terms of recommendation. So thank you for that introduction. I would love to talk.
Yep, I will do that. If I don't do it today, I will do it tomorrow, because I'm sure you're going to remind me.
Yes, I will.
I know. Thank you so much. I remember. So the part that you talked about, technology, which is where I live,
Yes.
I have some specific things about technology that bothers me, and I'm sure you read this or heard this. Do you remember when Google first came out with their facial recognition software?
Yes. Yes.
And every time it saw a dark person, it put up a picture of a gorilla.
Yes.
For me, when I think about technology, I'm writing a book right now about emerging technologies, specifically where people of color are impacted by it. When Equifax had their breach, none of us are Equifax customers. We don't have a direct relationship with Equifax. We have it through our banks, our mortgages, or whatever we have. What Equifax offered were like monitoring your software, small cash payments and things like that. And less than 2.5% of the Black community took them up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons why is because we are not actively participating in technology as it's evolving. We're kind of consumers, right? So we have an iPad, we have an iPhone, we have whatever, but we are not developing. We are still consumers. And I think what you said about, artificial intelligence, biometrics, all of these kinds of things are going to really have either a very, very positive effect on Black and brown communities, or a very adverse effect on Black and brown communities, right? So right now, if you look at automation right now, specifically algorithms, if you live in zip code X, your health insurance may be more expensive than if you lived in zip code Y. Or if you are in a neighborhood that has a high rate of poverty, they're going to be more likely to produce things that continue to advance that poverty. So, I think technology is good, but I really do think that as you lawyers think about technology, one of the things you need to think about is you always have to filter in the why, the when, and the how. And what I mean by that is, so why are we creating this technology, right? So back in the day, you could go to a bank, sit across from a bank loan officer and say, I want a loan. Now it's an algorithm that takes these characteristics together and say, yes, you can get a loan, and this is how much you can get your loan for. So I think that it's really important that Black lawyers specifically consider what these new emerging technologies will be, because the current technologies already discriminate. So let's consider these emerging technologies that are going to move much further and become much better. And I'll say one more thing about that. So Sam's and I can't remember the other company right now, have now gone to QR code checkout. So you scan everything, you hold up your QR code on your phone, and you walk out. Who are the people who are going to lose their jobs when this becomes the standard day, right? So the people who are already on the margins. So as you think about what you're doing, I think it's very important that you understand that technology in and of itself is not meant for us. It's not.
Yeah. So a couple of things. I'm actually in the next day or so submitting an application to Yale to be a part of a fellowship dealing with AI and the use in the healthcare industry. So I'm really focused in on that. I think that, brown and black people are great purveyors and users of technology, but the question is they're doing it more in terms of a social media platform and what have you. And I think sometimes what's happening is that because it's a social issue, they don't really get the business piece of it, which is your data. Now they know that a little bit, but I think maybe because of what happened in the last 30 days with George Floyd dying, I think you're starting to see emerge issues in terms of social unrest, injustice, and they want to see that change. I think the protest seemingly has broadened out to talk about the system overall being unfair, and so I think you're starting to see a lot of people deal with that. But just recently, in the last couple of days, Lyft and Uber were upcharging because of the algorithm, charging people who were brown and black higher rates. So even though the companies themselves had on their banners Black Lives Matter, in the back end, their algorithm didn't seem to recognize Black Lives Matter, and somebody, to your point, should have been asking the question, right? So one of the thoughts that I have in terms of thinking about AI in this new era where people are saying they're trying to reimagine technology, reimagine the financial sector, reimagine healthcare after COVID-19, is how many brown and black people are at the table at the time that the code is being written. And
The
who
number
is
is so
looking?
small, you would be shocked.
Correct. Right. And so, who's participating in that? And then who's making sure that in the machine learning that the AI is recognizing potentially that there is a bias, and what is it doing in terms of reevaluating and ensuring that if this person is a person of color, what should we do in terms of rethinking that so that we could get to equality and making sure that there's justice and what have you? Is it thinking about the historical injustices that have happened to Black people for 400 years to assist the doctor in making recommendations? Is it helping the financial banks realize that in Baltimore, where redlining started, that redlining still occurs? Are you now thinking about whether or not you're doing something to help make sure that brown and black people can get loans to try to create wealth in that particular way and things of that nature? So I agree with you that, we've got to, as black lawyers, as brown lawyers, women as well, making sure that when you're talking to your clients, how is that code being written? And then as from the government standpoint, what's the policy to make sure that the code and the products are not discriminating against people? So for example, one of the thoughts that I had was Medicare, Medicaid, and its reimbursement, making sure that the software manufacturer or the hospital can't get reimbursed for using that software unless they certify that their code is not, discriminating. Those are the sort of things, because reimbursement is what you're looking for. So if you're not getting reimbursed, then it may take a long time for private insurers to try to do something or reimburse you. But that's not the big pot. The big pot is Medicare, Medicaid. And then, so if you can do that, maybe that might help balance some things out.
Well, I will just tell you, I have a friend that has a farm somewhere in North Carolina, out in the sticks or somewhere. And so my daughter's an organic fiend. She only eats organic food. If it doesn't have the word organic on it, she's just not there. So Whole Foods is our whole check, and and I was sitting there talking to him one day, and we were talking about that. And he said, my family's been farming for over 400 years. I think that's what he said. I may be wrong with the number. It was a very large number. He said, everything we put out, we put organic on it. He said not one bit of it is organic. So when you
Right.
bring that back to Medicare and Medicaid, you know, when you think about it in the prospect that, and there's a book I'm going to send you, or at least send you the title of it. A woman wrote about, I think it was in Ohio, Medicaid and Medicare through algorithms and artificial intelligence, how it was forcing people who were qualified, who had been on Medicare or Medicaid, and then started kicking them off because it didn't meet the criteria. And they got this vicious loop where every time they get one part right, they'd have to go back and do it all over again, to the point that the Medicare, and they did this with IBM Watson, that they had to go back and redo the entire Medicare, Medicaid system in that state. And I think the woman's name is Virginia S. Banks or Eubanks, but I'll send it to you. I mean, it's a fascinating read to read about how states intentionally try to disenfranchise Black and brown people for services. And you know, and I'm not a big fan of entitlements. I'm not. I hate paying taxes. It's about drive me crazy. For somebody sitting at home, you know, getting their hair done or whatever they're doing, and I'm in busting my butt, and I got to pay taxes for that. I get it. But I think that the reason why I think it's so important that lawyers, because although you may not be technologists, you know the law, and you can
Right.
look at the law and say, that's not just. So, you could say, okay, here's artificial intelligence, and Google, and I would bet you everything I own, Google did not intentionally create facial recognition software to present gorillas when it saw Black and brown people. The problem is, if the only you're working on that code is white and male, that's the only answer you're going to get.
Right.
And so when Google then launches this, I'm sure they have a legal team to make sure they've checked all the boxes and all that stuff, but finding bias. So if you and I were having a conversation, we were talking about playing spades, we understand what playing spades are, and we've got our own code for how we talk about playing spades.
Correct.
Whereas these same people who are creating these things have their own way of putting language that surrounds what they're doing and makes it sound like it's acceptable, it's good for all, when it's really not.
Well, I think one of the things, and that's why I was saying that you have to make sure that you have people of color at the place when the code is being written, so it can be challenged at that particular time. And you have to be comfortable in that space to be able to challenge that coder. And your organization has to be able to back you up and say, well, okay, you can't just dismiss or fire just because someone's challenging that coder. Now, then you have pressure of, we got to hurry up and get the code out, and we got to scale quickly. So you got to do it quickly, and we'll fix the bugs later. And you never fix the bug. So then the next question is, what happens at the next layer? Are we in positions of authority to be able to check coders and try to tweak that code and what have you? I don't think we're there. We have diversity, inclusion, managers, but I'm not sure whether or not they're technologists to be able to ask the question. They're looking at it from a hiring perspective. They may be scared to try to enforce, balance in terms of employment. Who knows? I mean, something's going to have to be done. Otherwise, if you do not do that, we will still suffer. And yet we'll have more of a powerful tool that prohibits the personal relationship to get to know someone, and decisions will be made in a vacuum, harming people. And that's the question that we're going to have to deal with going forward. I mean, any tool is great, but if I had a Ferrari and I'm looking at I-10 and it's back up, that great tool won't do me any good other than sitting there burning gas. Right. And so that's one of the things that I'm trying to think about in terms of the knowledge I learned at Duke, the knowledge I learned at Georgia Tech, knowledge I've learned here at the University of Houston, trying to tie all that together and be able to ask the question, what can we do going forward so that people aren't adversely affected because of a tool that was written by a 19-year-old, most likely, who does not have life experience. who thinks they may know what they're doing and intentionally and maybe unintentionally thinking they're doing okay, but because of their environment may not realize that their perspective may be leading to adverse impact on other people. And I understand exactly what you're saying.
Absolutely. And I would tell you one of the things I think about, especially Black and brown people and social media. And there's two pieces. The first part is privacy, and the second part is free. I tell people anything that is free is not free.
That's correct.
Right. And so we have these data brokers who are buying data from Facebook. That's how we got the 2016 election. You know, you've got all these things that are happening. And so as Black and brown people, we need to, even if we're not lawyers and doctors and, you know, whatever, we're just a simple technician like I am, we need to make sure we're aware of what's happening, right? So because you've had Gmail or whoever your email account is, start typing a word and see how many ads pop up with that word in it, because they're tracking everything you do. If you have a smartphone, everywhere you go, they know where you've gone and where you've done. And you can take your SIM card out, leave your SIM card at home. What they know is the minute you take that SIM card out, that you've done that for some reason. Why did you take the SIM card out? But to me, the thing that is really more interesting about what's happening with technology is that ATS, application tracking systems. I'm applying for a job, so I'm gonna submit my CV or my resume to a company, and I want to apply for a job. The first thing that company is going to do is do a complete dump of my name to social media. So you're going to go through Google, they're going to go through Facebook, they're going to go through LinkedIn, they're going to go and see what I have been talking about all these years. And for young people, you know, when they tell them, well, you know, I just ate a hot dog at such and such, or I'm at club such or such, you know, judgments are made in hiring someone by those kinds of posts. You know, I heard someone give a talk not too long ago at Duke that said, if you need to be social and tell everybody everything, have an alias. You know, call yourself, if your name is Rochelle, call yourself Shell or something. So you can have an alias, because when Rochelle goes to look for a job, they're going to find everything that I've ever done, you know. Okay. So I think that that's what really needs to happen when these tools, because as you said, you know, you've got young people who are coding these things, thinking they know what they know. But there are also young people who are using these, consuming these products, not understanding what they do. Data brokers buy and sell data every single day, and every social media platform, Instagram, I don't care who it is that is out there, someone's buying that data, packaging it, massaging it, and selling it to someone so they can either do something for you or against you.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing too is, and again, I'm going to say that I'm not adverse to data brokers, right? Because I'm hoping that Black and brown people become data brokers and make money the same particular way. But I just actually had a conversation with a guy on Saturday who came to the building where my flat is, and he was filming a commercial, and he's trying to do the same thing. So I'm happy that he's trying to do the same thing, but I try to make sure I try to be clear with them. I understand that you're trying to help increase sales, but your real value is not the increase in sales. Your value is the data, because that's what everybody is looking for in order to make decisions. And so, and he got it. But I think that at the end of the day, I think that what we have to do, especially in this environment now, is you have to take control of your own personal life. So, for example, California has passed the CCPA, the Privacy Act, which has something called the right to be forgotten in it, just like the GDPR. And so you're going to need to start doing those sort of things, but you got to trust the system to say, once you have the right to be forgotten, are you really forgotten? Has this company made sure that your existence in their database is gone, you know? And yet you're right, you may need to create a avatar and make sure that nobody knows how to be able to track you and say, hey, today I'm at this restaurant, or I'm over here, or, you know, always telling people what their current situation is. You know, it's an interesting world that we live in. I do think that people believe that they cannot trust the system, but the question ultimately, are you exercising your rights that are given to you under the privacy laws to ensure that that sort of information, it cannot be used against you. For example, let's talk about healthcare. This 23andMe, the genetic, all that information is, yes, you're getting some sort of information, but in return, they're getting this wealth of information about people that they're using to make money. Okay, I'm fine with that. But the question ultimately for brown and black people is that far too often, the value that you get versus the value that they get is going to be an imbalance. Are they hiring people because they're getting this value? What other value can you gain, or can these companies do to make sure that, given the historic racism that that everybody seems to be on the right side of history about today, what can you do to help disadvantaged people benefit, in addition to getting information about their history, benefit in terms of healthcare? Do you make sure that your algorithm can say, okay, for example, let's say that the data identifies certain indications about your DNA, okay? Do they give you that information and say, hey, and you might want to see this doctor, and maybe this doctor might be able to look at and provide some sort of care at a reduced cost? I don't know. Something has to be done to help even the playing field, so that, people aren't just giving their information for free and getting nothing in return. That's what I'm hoping that we need to do to try to, bring social justice to the world of technology, amongst other things.
So it's very strange that you said 23andMe and Ancestry and all these things. So how far can Black people go back to find out where they are? So all we know is some of us were captured, put on a boat, and brought here. So what part of Africa are we from?
Well, they can't tell you that.
Right. But more importantly, what's really interesting about this, I don't know if you probably not a criminal justice kind of guy, but there was a guy in California for many years who had killed and raped a whole bunch of people. And just a couple of years ago, they caught him because some of his family member had done a DNA ancestry check or something, and they were able to trace the dots back to him. And he was finally arrested and caught after years of being free, doing this thing over and over and over again. So to me, the thing that's most interesting about technology, it's why I love it and hate it at the exact same time. It has great purpose, but it's not always used for great purposes, if that makes sense to you. So you've got all these kind of little things that are in our world that are there. And a guy who I did a diversity chat with very early this morning said something to me that was so profound. I had to lie down for a few minutes because I didn't know if I heard correctly. He said to me, if you could imagine white people coming over on a boat and finding no one looked like them, what's the first thing they're going to do? Try to gain power. And so now, as you look at us today, what incentive do they have to give power? When white people ask me what do I need them to do, or what should they do, I'm always perplexed by that question, because we've been going through this forever. Native Americans have been going through, Chinese, Japanese, all kinds of people have suffered at the hands of these people who came to a country seeking freedom from persecution, who began to kill and persecute and do all these things. So he said it was a mental health issue. My question is, specifically in my area of work, so is that someone wrote an article, a healthcare person wrote a research article on PTSD and the DNA coding on Black genes, which I think is phenomenal. It's a phenomenal article because, really, the person says every Black person has PTSD. And
okay, so you're going to send me that article too, right?
Yes, I'm going to send you that article too. And every Black person has something coded in their DNA that makes you susceptible to high blood pressure or diabetes or whatever this. And maybe it's being in the bottom of that boat for however many miles it took to get from where they were to America. And so it's really interesting what's really interesting to read about that is because, I don't consider myself having PTSD. You know, I am traumatized by lots of things that happen to me at work, happen to me at home, happen to me all, but I don't consider myself mentally ill.
Right.
But maybe I am. Maybe
Yeah.
I am because I can't see and stop what's happening to me every day. So when we go back to Mr. Floyd and the 12-year-old little boy in the park playing with a BB gun and Breonna and all those other people, why are we just now protesting? Why are we just now upset? And to further extrapolate upon that, COVID killed more Black people and brown people. And is that a healthcare issue? Is it because we have some inherent health issues that make us susceptible to it? Or is it because the people who are caring for us aren't applying the correct formulas, medicine, whatever it is, that helps us survive COVID?
Well, I think ultimately, so let's get back to link that back to AI. So that's what I'm saying. Is the AI system taking all of that into consideration? So the article that you read that talked about PTSD in healthcare and systemic and historic racism that has occurred, are they taking that into consideration in determining what the best course of action should be and recommendations, right? Have we always been we've always been protesting. That's the issue. We've always been protesting this issue. So it's nothing new. The question ultimately is that I believe is I still have conversations with friends of mine who happen to be white. I think they know me enough to be balanced when I have these conversations. I will be honest with them. I will ask them to think about this. And all I can really do is communicate what I feel and hope that when they think about that after the conversation, that helps them evolve in terms of their thinking. If that can continue to occur in this current climate, I think that we're going to be on a good path, glide path to reach, as President Obama would say, the more perfect union. But it's going to take some time, and it's going to take generations for us to continue to heal that wound. But I do think that even in Facebook with my friends who were white and they were listening to me write in terms of George Floyd and what's going on in politics and what have you, they were very receptive to hearing what I was trying to say and draw comparisons and things of that nature, where I think they got a big understanding from a person who's Black. How am I looking at this? And because of that, they were able to respond intelligently. And now I've been trolled before on Facebook on things, but I think you got to have the conversation. I've had conversations with people and say, I'm not having a conversation with white people about this, to your point, because we know that you've seen this for 400 years. Well, you still have to have the conversation, because if you don't have the conversation, it will not change. And there are people who are not going to listen, but there are going to be more people who are going to listen. You gotta have, my father would say, you gotta have that conversation if you're going to change something. I think Dr. King really had a conversation with the nation to try to reach them at their moral center and pose that question. And, interesting, I know we're bouncing around. Just recently, I started watching something called the Jude 3 Project. I don't know if you're very familiar with that, but, religion really needs to be a part of this conversation, because, as you can see, you have the evangelicals who are white, evangelicals who are Black, people who are Baptists from the North are different from the Baptists of the South. What do we really know about our Christian faith, right? And until we reconcile that aspect of it as well, because a lot of decisions and thought patterns are being driven by that. We got a whole bunch of stuff we got to work on in order to help make sure that we don't look at you. The first thing I see with Rochelle is that she's a black woman, or stages a Black male. that you hopefully just see me as a male and evaluate me based upon how you interact with me as opposed to the color of my skin. Or a friend of mine who's white and I see the first thing is he's a white male. And then all the PTSD that I have in my brain, what I have seen on television, what I've seen on the news, and then have to reconcile those those prejudices to come to a place where I can view him one-on-one as a clean slate. That's going to be hard. That's what society's going to have to be able to do for everybody, just like in hiring practices, right? Are you afraid to hire somebody who doesn't look like you, who has unique talents that may not match your talents? You know, when I hired law clerks, I hired gay, straight, male, female, white, black, Hispanic. I remember the conversation I had with a white law clerk, male. And I looked at his resume and I saw that he was part of an association of law students that were, LGBTQT, if I'm saying it correctly. And I didn't know what that was. And I asked him the question. He said, well, it's an organization for gay law students. And he asked me, did I have a problem with that? I said, no, do you have a problem with it? The only reason why I asked that question was because I didn't know. And so he said, no. I said, then great, you're hired. And because he was qualified, he didn't look like me. I may not share his viewpoint on sexuality, but that didn't matter. It was opportunity, and he was qualified and what have you. And he's a lawyer now and doing particularly well. We have to get to that point about in this diversity, if our quest for diversity, to make sure that you have the courage to hire somebody who may not look like you, if that person is qualified to be able to do that job, and have the courage to stand against other people who would say, why would you do that?
You know, I'm not optimistic at all. You know, how many times have we been here? You know, I mean, I think that, sure, we can continue to educate our white friends about how things have been for us, but someplace along there, I think they need to take accountability for why this has existed so long. So we went from slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, into whatever it is we have now today. Poverty among the Black and brown community is higher than it is in any other group. Correct. Unemployment higher than any other group. So as progressive as some white people are and how friendly they are, they come by, want to go have a beer, want to go have dinner, want to chat with you, want to come to your house and, participate with their family and all that stuff. My question is why is it that we still have the highest number of Black and brown men in prison? Why is it we have such a high number of Black and brown people unemployed or not even reaching poverty? Why is this still existing in 2020? Because if we are, and I've heard this, now this is one of the things, I don't know what it means. People say if you are woke, I don't know what that means. People tell me all the time, you're woke. Okay, I didn't know I was asleep, but okay, if I'm awoke now, as a whole society, why haven't I seen this for years? Why is it?
Well, I didn't mean to interrupt. I mean, look, I do not subscribe in this time, and just preface my remarks about all lives matter, okay? But having said all of that, I will just say this. You are asking a question that has perplexed mankind since Adam, if you will, left the doggone garden. Mankind has always, for whatever reason, and we can get into it, has always mistreated his brother. It is going to take time. So one of the things I was thinking about in terms of writing is saying we need to get to what we hope to get to, that Star Trek society, where everybody, even though it was hierarchical, it was basically seeking to try to create a utopian society. We have to try to get there. But until we get there, the inequity in life is just going to be there. And all you can do and everything that I can do is just worry about the people that I interact with on a daily basis, and hope that I can, as the old Negro speak, if I can change one mind, make a difference in one person's life, and hope that that person changes or they change me, and I go and sin no more, then we've made some progress. And you got to look at progress as evolution in incremental steps and hope that we are going in that particular direction. Otherwise, if you don't think that way, then, you sit back and say, what the hell for? And, and nothing will change. And so you have no choice but to remain hopeful, because otherwise that PTSD is just going to continue to manifest itself. I mean, for example, the kindness that you showed me while I was there at Duke, I have never forgotten that, right? And so, being there, being by myself and what have you, and all the other stuff and what have you, you don't know how that kindness told me that God existed, right?
Right.
And so therefore it continued to guide me in terms of when I see somebody also in help, that needs help, I do that.
Yeah.
When so you don't know that, you know that now, but the point of the matter is that you have done that consistently. So even though I hear what you're saying, interacting with you has changed lives. Yeah. And that's all you can really do. And that shows so that, hopefully, and again, I know we're dipping in and out of our faith and what have you, but at the end of the day, when you go before God and he says to you, Rochelle, when you saw that person over there, you helped them. That was me. Yeah. Right? You let that person know I existed. Yep. Right? You know then that means that you can continue to go, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that really will matter, which is being able to stand and say, I fought that fight. I did what I needed to do. I helped this person, asked nothing for myself in doing it, and made a difference in that person's life. And for that, I will say thank you. And for all the other people that you're talking to, I am sure they're saying the same thing. Say thank you. Thank you for this, being able to do this diversity chat. And hopefully people are listening and do the same thing. I will tell you probably need to do a podcast, even though that's what this is, but you need to do a podcast, use that technology background that you have and do that. And just continue to make a difference in the lives of people at Duke and Durham and across the country.
Yeah, and but my situation is a little bit different. And I think this. This is where I miss you, because I miss having these kind of conversations with people. Somebody that we can just have this conversation without trying to filter or trying to protect or whatever. It's just a pure conversation. I grew up poor. I grew up being called the N-word. I grew up being disadvantaged in every way you could possibly be disadvantaged. So to me, to help is, I'm just looking at my young self, myself when I was in that stage, myself when I was in that place, myself when these things were happening to me. And BALSA, to me, at Duke Law, it's like my heart. It's like my heart, because you see these kids struggling to get to law school because they don't have a big collaborative group of white, black, and brown people collaborating. Usually they have to count on each other just to get to the other side, and to get there, and for me, that's my love and my everything. It's one of the reasons why I love working at the law school, is because of BALSA, because they are Black Law Students Association, for y'all who don't know what BALSA is. But really it's such an important thing, because when I look at the world, I just see me, This is what happened to me. I was 19 years old when I was raped in broad daylight. So when women tell me about those stories, I see me, so this is what happened to me, Sure. And so, as I walk this path, my hope is that we don't have to keep teaching people how to behave. We should see everybody as human. You may not be Black, you may not be white, you may not be Chinese, you may not be Japanese, you might not be Hispanic, Latinx, whatever the construct is, you may not be that, but that person is a human being. And we don't get any further ahead unless we help each other.
Correct.
You know? So as much as I know about technology, as much as I could do, I mean, I could just go off and start my own company and just go at it. Well, but then I'd be only helping me. I wouldn't be helping anybody else. I wouldn't be looking out for anybody else, you know, and I think that, you know, like, I do understand that some white people are troubled by what they're seeing.
I think a lot of them are troubled by what they're saying. I think a lot. Like I said, I had a friend of mine who I worked with, and she sent me an email saying, Sager, what do I need to say to my young sons about this, right? You have to have the conversation because they don't know how to have that conversation, you know? And I just said, you need to just basically say, be a good man. What does that mean, right? This just go, we have to strip down to the studs and say, be a good man, be a good woman, you know, do think like I said, in hiring practices, ask yourself, self-evaluate. Why are you kicking this resume? Are you trying to be safe, or are you looking for somebody who thinks like you? And because if you pick that person, you're relatively safe and you're not going to be embarrassed. So what if you're going to be embarrassed, right? You try. You got to continue to try. And, you know, we say these things in our lives and we have all these principles about try and fail and things of that nature, but nobody really wants to do that. You know, and so, look, at the end of the day, I would just say is this, you know, your experiences of how you started and versus where you are on the other side, to use your phrase, right? You are now on the other side. You are using your gifts. You are using your talents. You are using the person who Rochelle has now is today. Not that person back then, but that person who is today, to do good. Fortunately, it's not the beginning of your story that matters. It is the end of your story that matters. You know, otherwise, like I had a conversation the other day, just like the guy who wrote Amazing Grace, right? Just like people who said, you know what, I helped enslave people. I was wrong. Let me see what I can do to restore the damage that I have caused. That's all you can really hope to do in this life, is help restore the damage. And if you can do that, then I think that you have, then you've achieved something, and you may have helped somebody. And that very person who you helped might have been the person who then you provided him the bridge to solve cancer. Or to take a case and argue that case in the Supreme Court that changed society. You don't know. All you can do is help that person right there and fulfill your assignment at that particular moment. That's all you can do.
You know, I've always had this conversation with God. I used to believe when I was younger, God actually had a vendetta against me. He was personally trying to destroy me because so many bad things that happened to me when I was younger. I said, this man here just hates me and I don't know why.
Yeah.
But when I had my awakening, and I'm not talking about being awoke now because I don't know what that means, but my awakening, I made a promise to God, from this day until the day my eyes close, I will do something for someone every single day of my life.
And you have done that. And as long as you do that, then the world is a better place than it was yesterday.
But I want to talk about you specifically. So when you finished your LLM, you did a great job. You know, you went through all the trials and tribulations.
Yep.
And the people who were supposed to help you, who were supposed to get you to that next place, you know, put their hands up in the air. So I don't know what you're talking about, you know. And Dean Levy, you know, he's no longer our dean. He's moved on to running Bulch at Duke now. But I mean, he stepped in. You know, he and I had a very good relationship, and he stepped in and he helped you. And
he tried.
He tried. He did. Yeah. Right. And so for me, that's what I'm paying God back for my transgressions all of my life. And I don't know what all my transgressions were because I don't remember all that stuff. I'm old and senile now. But but I will say, you know, like that's what I do every single day. You know, we had a student, I think it was in 2018. She was brilliant, Boston student, brilliant by every stretch of the word. She could turn the law and do backflips. And so she could not find an internship for her second year. Well, Sherry Beasley, who was the Chief Justice in North Carolina, was a friend. I connected two of them, and she went and clerked for Sherry Beasley, who at the time she was just a justice. She wasn't a Chief Justice. And when I think about that, like that's not they don't pay me to do that. They don't acknowledge I do any of that. You know, I mean, like I'm the troublemaker or whatever it is that they say about me. But these conversations I have with God, and I am not a Christian. I'm gonna tell you right now, I am a spiritual. I believe in God, and I believe in the universe, and I believe in God. And I stop right there. I ain't going to no man's house to give him a Maybach or whatever the hell it is. God and I know. And I heard a thing by the guy who founded Motown. He said his father told him, he said when he was a little boy, his father told him, you don't need to go to church because God is in you.
Right. It's true.
And so my question is for society, where is God in you? Because how could God be in you and you put your knee on some man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds? God in you. I'm not perfect by any stretch. I make all kinds of mistakes, you know, I mean, all the time. But there's just nothing I could think of that would make me want to hurt anything or anybody. Even these, you know, like I hate slugs. I mean, it's just the grossest looking creature I've ever seen in my whole life, and whatever it is. And if I see them, I start screaming. Somebody comes running and do something about it because it's just such a gross creature. But I couldn't imagine killing it.
Right. But again, here's your thought. You are trying to understand a God and a universe that is bigger, grander, more complex than we can think about. Just like, you know, quantum technology, right? It's trying to calculate on a grander scale, greater than your brain can process. You will never know why things happen. But that universe, God, whoever you want to call it, is the beginning and there is an end. It is all for a purpose. Again, we ask ourselves these. I've had conversations with God and they've been brutal. But at the end of the day, I have to say to myself, He's always seen me through.
I had to learn that. I did not know that. I used to think when he was doing all these terrible, that man in broad daylight in Miami, Florida, puts a knife to my neck and there are people milling all around me. Where is God? And you know, it was a Jewish lady who said this to me. She said, honey, when you were seeing those footsteps, it wasn't you that was walking, it was God carrying you. And, you know, I kind of thought, you know, that might be what it is, because as much as I had been through, I should be dead or, you know, insane or something, which I may be, but, you know, something. So God had to be there all the time. And I think that's the same thing for you. You know, like, I think the fact that you keep getting this education, I think this is one of those places where I think what I know about stager, my stager, is that you are already everything you need to be. You did.
You're right.
You if you never went to another class again, you are everything you are supposed to be, and you have a very specific person. That's my stager. Now, your stager might have to think, well, you know, I need to go get some more degrees. I need to write some more articles. I need to do this. But my stager, I've always known this. I think from the very first time I met you, there's something about you that's different than most men, regardless of their color. I mean, I think there's something that inside of you that kind of permeates out to everybody around you, and you see and hear greatness. No matter what it is you're talking about, because sometimes you could talk about some really foolish things, you know, but there's still greatness coming out of you, always coming out, you know, so it attracts people to you. And that's your God's gift, you know, as you bring people to you, because inside of you, one, you know who your father is, but two, you know that you are great. You know that you are exceptional. You know,
Yeah.
that you are phenomenal. You know, and I'm not just talking about this as a black woman talking to a black, I'm just talking about as a human being that you are, right?
Yeah.
And so for me to help you was just for me to see that you go where you need to go and do what you need to do, so that one day, you know, when they're reading my epitaph, you know, that woman did something for some, what, stage or something. That's, you know, they're just, you know, that part right there. That was just a little small part of helping you be who you are. But you are already who you are. You have been who you are since the first day I met you.
Well, and I will tell you that I know that is my own personal struggle. Making, you know, being okay with who I am. And that is a daily struggle. And, you know, but again, you have to be true to yourself.
Yep.
You have to be able to, you know, a lot of people wouldn't say that publicly. But I think that's what makes me human. That's when I get to see other people and their struggle. And every day when I interact with them, try to speak life into them, as I hope people try to speak life into me. And yes, you're right. I probably should have stopped a while ago.
I just spoke life into you. I hope you heard it.
No. I always say that you do. And I got a call at 5 o'clock. So what we can do is we can continue this conversation. You know, I think this is great. And I appreciate you reaching out and giving me a chance to have a conversation. And hopefully the conversation will be helpful to somebody out there in cyberspace that's looking to try to see how they can help society, mankind, move from where it is to the next step. And we can talk about space next time, because that's the next frontier. And I think that's something that I think brown and black people need to really pay attention to, is these space flights. That's the next frontier. And I know that's out there, but I think people really
I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. So go to your 5 o'clock class. I'm going to send you a copy of this video so you can look at it first.
No, we're good. You have my authorization.
Well, thank you very much. And then I always ask everybody to do another one and another one and another one, because every time I have one, I get more from it than I did before. And I think, as you said, it's valuable for others. So go to your conversation, stay safe. And I'm going to send you some things. First, I'm going to do is connect you to Michelle, and then I'll send you a separate email with some documentation in it. Okay.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hey,
good to see you.
Good to see you too. Stay in touch. Don't
I will. I will. I promise.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye. See ya.
Bye.